The stench hit first. It was an odor so overpowering, so vile, that it seemed to cling to the very air, making it almost unbreathable. Those who encountered it were immediately repulsed, their faces contorting in instinctive disgust. Acrid, thick, and undeniably the smell of death. It was a scent that spoke of decay, of life extinguished in the most brutal of manners, the kind of smell that once experienced is never forgotten. It lingered, a ghostly reminder of the horrors that lay hidden. It wafted from 6 plastic barrels stacked unceremoniously in an abandoned bank vault in the sleepy town of Snowtown, South Australia, May 20th, 1999. The barrels, seemingly innocuous at first glance, held within them a secret so dark it would forever change the town's history. This date would forever be etched in the annals of Australian crime, a chilling testament to the depravity lurking beneath the surface of ordinary lives. The discovery was not just a crime scene, it was a window into the darkest corners of human nature. Inside those barrels, submerged in hydrochloric acid, lay the dismembered remains of 8 human beings. The acid, meant to erase their existence, instead preserved the evidence of their tragic end. Each body part told a story of unimaginable suffering and cruelty. Their stories, their identities, were about to unravel a horror the likes of which the nation had never seen. These were not just victims, they were individuals with lives, dreams, and families. Their disappearance had left a void, and now their discovery would fill it with dread. The discovery sent shockwaves through the country. Who were these victims? Each name, each face brought with it a story of loss and unanswered questions. The nation was gripped by a collective need to understand the depth of this tragedy. And who were the monsters responsible for their gruesome fate? The search for the perpetrators became a national obsession. The public demanded justice, and the authorities were under immense pressure to deliver answers. The small town of Snowtown, known more for its salt lakes than its secrets, became synonymous with unimaginable evil. Its serene facade was shattered, revealing a darkness that had festered unnoticed for years. The town's name would forever be linked with one of the most heinous crimes in Australian history. The nation held its breath, bracing itself for the truth that was about to unfold. News outlets covered every development, and the public followed the story with a mix of horror and fascination. The courtroom became a stage for a drama that no one could have scripted. It was a truth far more horrifying, far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. The revelations that followed would expose a web of deceit, manipulation, and pure malevolence. The Snowtown murders were not just a crime, they were a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that lies within humanity. The seeds of this nightmare were sown 7 years earlier, in 1992. It was a time when the small Australian town seemed like any other, with its quiet streets and close-knit community. But beneath the surface, a darkness was beginning to take root, one that would forever change the lives of its residents. John Bunting, a man with a chillingly ordinary facade and a heart filled with darkness, orchestrated the first of his heinous acts. He was a master of deception, blending seamlessly into the fabric of the community. To the untrained eye, he was just another face in the crowd, but those who looked closer could see the malevolence lurking beneath. His victims, the weak, the vulnerable, those deemed expendable in his twisted worldview. They were people who had fallen through the cracks of society, individuals who were already struggling to survive. Bunting saw them as easy targets, pawns in his sick game of control and domination. He lured them in with a dangerous combination of charisma and promises of friendship. He was a predator in every sense of the word, using charm and manipulation to gain their trust. Once they were ensnared, there was no escape. His victims were drawn to him, like moths to a flame, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. Little did they know, they were walking into his web of manipulation, a web that would soon become their tomb. Each step they took brought them closer to their doom, as Bunting tightened his grip on their lives. He was a master puppeteer, pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating their every move. His methods were brutal, fueled by a perverse sense of self-righteousness and a growing thirst for control. He believed he was on a mission, a crusade to rid the world of those he deemed unworthy. His actions were not just crimes. They were acts of pure evil, driven by a twisted ideology that justified his every move. He saw himself as judge, jury, and executioner, meting out his own twisted form of justice. In his mind, he was a savior, a hero, fighting against the decay of society, but in reality, he was a monster, a man who took pleasure in the suffering of others. His sense of superiority knew no bounds, and he reveled in the power he held over his victims. Around him, a group of equally disturbed individuals began to gather, drawn to his power and the darkness he embodied. They were lost souls, searching for meaning in a world that had abandoned them. Bunting offered them a sense of belonging, a twisted family bound by their shared depravity. Together, they formed a cult of personality, with Bunting at its center. They became his disciples, willing participants in his reign of terror. Each one played a role in his macabre theater, carrying out his orders with unwavering loyalty. They were more than just followers, they were accomplices, partners in crime who shared in the bloodshed. And as their numbers grew, so did the scale of their atrocities, casting a long, dark shadow over the town that would never be forgotten. John Bunting was the mastermind, the architect of this macabre conspiracy. He possessed a chilling ability to compartmentalize, to separate his outward persona from the monster within. To the outside world, he was unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the fabric of suburban life. But beneath the surface, a storm of hatred and violence raged, fueled by a warped sense of morality and an insatiable need for power. He surrounded himself with people he could control, individuals broken by life's hardships, desperate for belonging. He offered them a sense of purpose, a twisted family united by their shared darkness. They became his pawns, carrying out his bidding without question, their own moral compasses shattered under his influence. Section 4. Weaving the Web of Deception. Bunting and his cohorts preyed on the fringes of society. Drug addicts, the homeless, those struggling with mental illness, they were seen as easy targets, their disappearances unlikely to arouse suspicion. Bunting, a master manipulator, used their vulnerabilities against them, offering them shelter, food, and a sense of community. He presented himself as a savior, a beacon of hope in their otherwise bleak existence. Once he gained their trust, the torture would begin. Physical, psychological, relentless. He broke them down, stripping them of their dignity, their will to live. He recorded their suffering, their pleas for mercy, finding a perverse pleasure in their pain. Their deaths when they came were slow, agonizing, and merciless. Section 5. The Town of Whispers. As the body count rose, so too did the whispers. The once peaceful town of Snowtown was now shrouded in an atmosphere of dread and suspicion. Every corner seemed to hold a secret, every shadow a potential threat. The townsfolk, who once greeted each other with warm smiles, now exchanged wary glances and hushed conversations. Rumors spread through the close-knit community, whispers of strange disappearances, of screams heard in the night. The stories grew more elaborate with each retelling, painting a picture of a town gripped by an unseen terror. Parents kept their children indoors, and the streets, once filled with the laughter of kids playing, now echoed with an eerie silence. But fear kept most silent. The fear of the unknown, the fear of becoming the next victim, and the fear of Bunting's wrath. Windows were shuttered, doors were locked, and the once vibrant community became a ghost town after sunset. The few who dared to venture out did so with a sense of urgency, always looking over their shoulders. Bunting had instilled a culture of fear and intimidation, silencing those who dared question his authority. His presence was a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. He was a master manipulator, using fear as his primary weapon. His followers, loyal to a fault, enforced his rule with an iron fist, ensuring that dissent was swiftly and brutally dealt with. He controlled his followers with an iron fist, using threats and violence to maintain his grip on power. The townspeople knew that any attempt to defy him would be met with severe consequences. Stories of those who had tried and failed were whispered in hushed tones, serving as a grim reminder of Bunting's reach and ruthlessness. The town of Snowtown became his hunting ground, its residents living in the shadow of his evil. The once bustling town square, now deserted, stood as a testament to the fear that had taken hold. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of foreboding was palpable. Every creak, every rustle of leaves was enough to send shivers down the spines of the townsfolk. Even those who suspected the truth were too afraid to speak out, paralyzed by the fear of becoming his next victims. The knowledge of Bunting's cruelty was enough to keep them silent. They lived in constant fear, their lives overshadowed by the threat of violence. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming, and the hope of escape seemed like a distant dream. The police, initially dismissive of the disappearances, began to connect the dots, but the investigation was slow, hampered by a lack of evidence and the fear that gripped the town. The officers, too, were not immune to the pervasive sense of dread. They knew that uncovering the truth would mean confronting Bunting and his followers, a task that was fraught with danger. Yet as the pressure mounted, they realized that they could no longer turn a blind eye. The fate of Snowtown hung in the balance, and the whispers of the town demanded to be heard.